EGIF, my friends. Welcome to Friday, and welcome back to yet another community watch party for your Pantheon developer update stream. That is a really long intro for these sorts of streams, but you know what? I like it, so I'm going to keep it. This month, we are jumping into a stream again that happened yesterday. I know a lot of you have probably already have seen it. I have not. I'm going in completely fresh. I know that it is about the monk class, which we have seen several monk focused streams in the past, but there have been my understanding is there's been several changes to the way combat works and animations and things like that, and techniques and things like that. So it'll be interesting, I think, to take a look at that and be able to directly contrast it to the last monk highlight stream that they did, which was just about 10 months ago. So less than a year, we can kind of gauge to see exactly what has changed, eliminate all the other variables. Also, as I was talking about last month, really the big thing, like as cool as it is to look at combat, the big thing right now is the network library overhaul. Okay, that is the pinnacle of really what we as a community need to hear more about. But because the process was started in March, I think, and they originally said it would take about 2 months, and so we're pushing about 3 months now. So I would like to hear more about that, but I will say, with that said, at the end of last month's live stream, I don't know if you guys remember this, but they said that these monthly Twitch streams were going to be, they're going to kind of transition them to be less about what they've worked on in the past 30 days. And they called it Pantheon Monthly, which I don't exactly know what it means. I kind of get the vibe that it's like, rather than specifically talking about like, here's what we did in the past month, like they're just going to kind of talk about whatever they want, I guess. So we'll see how that we'll see how that shakes out. Also, for this stream, for the first time ever, we are going to be debuting Pantheon Dev Stream Bingo, which again, I know technically this was announced yesterday or even before that. I know some of you have already played along. I have not. This is gonna be my first time. This is a game created by the Library of Pantheon team, and if you use !bingo in chat, you can get your own card to play along. A little bit of background on Pantheon Bingo. First of all, let me show you. Let me switch over to our watch party screen. Here we go. Okay, so you see this is my bingo card down below. Okay, and I'm sure you all know how to play bingo, but a little bit of I want to give a little bit of context as to where this came from. Okay, so a lot of you have heard me talk about before how I come from a gaming family. Okay, pretty much my entire family are gamers. It is impossible for us to get together for whatever reason and not play games. Okay, to some degree or another, and so that includes the Super Bowl. Okay, every year, when family gets together, we have a classic, Super Bowl party, but we also play Super Bowl bingo. Okay, and Super Bowl bingo is just regular bingo, except instead of numbers, you're looking for things, usually like advertisements and like logos on the screen during the Super Bowl. This is not something that we came up with. This is something you can find them all over the internet. Okay, but it it makes watching the Super Bowl a lot more fun, in my opinion. Okay. And I have shared that with other friends, even outside our family, and roped in even some people that, you know, maybe at the Super Bowl party that aren't really interested in football. They might not really know how football works, but anybody can play bingo. Okay. We're still getting them engaged. They're playing along, and it's a good time. Okay. And so this got me thinking. We've been doing this for years. Okay. This got me thinking. I was like, you know, the streams that Visionary Realms does to reveal gameplay with Co-Carnage, like that's kind of like the Super Bowl for the Pantheon community, right? Like they don't come around very often, but when they do, there's lots of hype, right? Like, you know, we're going to be seeing something good. So I was like, why don't we do bingo for those Co-Carnage streams? And so that's already made. That exists. That came first. And then it was in the process of talking about this with in the official Pantheon Discord with some of the other VIPs, the idea came up, like, why don't we just do this every month? Like, we get developer live streams every month, and there are a lot of like recurring themes, a lot of things that kind of happen month to month. Yeah, but totally, that was a great idea. I think hopefully I think it will work great, but we're gonna find out tonight. But I think it makes a lot more fun, and it will force us to really pay attention to make sure that we don't miss. There's no prize. It's all just for fun, but I will get competitive even when there's no prize. Okay. So hopefully play along with me. If you get bingo, shout it out. Let me know in chat, and we'll see how it goes. So I've got my card down here below. Once you get your card up, just FYI, if you don't know how to play, you can, when you get your card, it will randomly rearrange the squares and what's on the squares. You might not even get the same words every card. So yours might look the same as mine. There's a chance that it might look the same as mine, but it might look different from mine. But once you have your card, you click on any one of the squares to place an X on it. So start off with everybody start off with get your free space in the middle, put an X on that. And then when we're watching the stream, okay, the things that are in quotation marks are things that we hear, something that the devs say. So, so if, you know, we're talking about the monk class tonight. So at some point, a dev is going to probably utter the word combat. Okay. And when that happens, then I'm going to hit that combat square and X that out. Okay. Anything that's not in quotation marks are just kind of other things that might happen. Like, you know, they might show some concept art. They might, somebody will probably make a Dead Ronic joke at some point. You know, things like that. We don't necessarily need to hear specific words, but it's just things that happen, okay, throughout the stream. And we tried to include as many things that commonly happen during these streams as possible. So if you can't see, hopefully my card is big enough you guys can read it. I know some of the text is a little bit small. Again, this is all just for fun. This is very experimental. This is the first month that we've done this. If people really like it, we'll try to, you know, take it a little bit further and clean it up a little bit. But for the time being, I'll go through my card just so everybody, just in case you can't see what I got. We'll go through it one by one here, because I'm sure that if I forget something, I'll be very helpful in pointing it out. All right, so first, okay, I'm just gonna go across the top. Okay, upper left, disposition. I'm gonna go from left to right and then down each row. Okay, we got disposition, robust, bean, crafting, video montage, lore reading, Dead Ronic joke, combat, perception, Q&A with chat, network, unity, patch notes, Pantheon is a crowdfunded game, climbing, class, onward and upward, concept art, soon, exploration, climate, in-game footage, alpha, and scale. Okay, everybody got that? Cool. All right. I hope let's see. Where's my most likely, maybe straight up and down. Where's my most likely bingo? So once you get 5 in a row, either horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, any 5 in a row, shout out bingo. All right. Straight up and down, this bean combat onward and upward in-game footage, that's pretty hot. That might happen in this stream. Again, I'm looking at the network. The more I think about it, with what they were saying last month, my impression is that the stuff about the network update and like the next pre-alpha test and stuff, those big announcements, based on how they were describing these streams as Pantheon monthly, I'm guessing the big announcements are going to be reserved for the newsletter, or at least actually that's kind of like my hope. I think that would actually, as much as I want good information to be injected into these streams, those really, really big things probably makes more sense to go into the newsletters because everybody gets the newsletters. So I don't know. I'll stop speculating. Let's jump in. Hope you guys are doing well. I see a lot of familiar faces in chat here tonight. We've got Gullo Gullo, Wizen, Grizzly, Dez, Mordred, Thorndeep. Everybody's here. Good times. We got a good crowd for bingo. Best of luck, everybody. Desmond says, slick haircut, Baz. Thanks, man. Just a couple days ago. Supercuts. Don't underestimate supercuts. Super cheap, super quick, and they do a good job. Not sponsored, by the way. I'm just saying that's where I go, and there's no shame. Grizzly says, oh, can you explain what T-Home was telling us at the end about the healing mech? I got confused about what he was telling me. I have no idea. I haven't watched this. You know what? Let's just jump in and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay. I will keep that in mind though. I'll keep that in mind when we get there.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the June 9th, 2022 Pantheon Rise of the Fallen development stream. I'll get that right one of these days. I am your host, David Roenick-Schlau. With me, as always, is my co-host, Anthony Guidi, aka Minus.
Hey, David. Yeah, well, and we practiced too ahead of time.
Wait, Des says Ko was in the stream chat last night. That's cool. So, like on the Visionary Realms channel when this was first live, that's cool of him to pop in. I wonder how often he does that. I don't remember him doing that. That's cool. I can't wait to the next time that he does a gameplay stream. We can bust out some Co-Carnage bingo. I might even make, who knows? I might even, if this works well, I might even make one for like the round tables that they do every month. The possibilities for bingo are endless. But that's nice. That's nice of Ko. I also heard that like Narc, one of the Ashes of Creation content creators, was watching the stream last night with his community. So it's like it's interesting. It's interesting that like this is the stream that like people they're perking their ears up, you know. Hopefully it was a good one. Let's find out.
That was the thing. We shouldn't have done that. Just let it go, right?
I feel like, yeah, I'm just never going to get it. But, you know, the good news is, look who's with us tonight. Adam Mostel, a.k.a. Tehome, is with us. What's up, Adam?
A lot. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be able to talk about everything that we've had going on lately. Drop some beans. I know someone's probably got that on a bingo card out there, so you're welcome. So yeah, if you guys
hey, oh yeah, bean. He said bean. Holy crap! I haven't even been. I'm reading chat. Hey, Locks, by the way. I need to stay focused. I'm not gonna lie. When I'm doing these watch parties, my attention is divided a little bit more than it would be than if I was just sitting down alone just watching the stream. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I miss things, and then I go back after and then I watch it again, and then I notice I'm like, wow, I missed a lot. So, and maybe this is your second time. Maybe you're watching this stream live yesterday, and this is you rewatching. Hopefully, maybe you'll catch something this time around that you didn't notice last night. So, wow, okay, I need to focus in. All right, we're playing bingo. I'm glad T-Home reminded me because I had already completely forgotten. How long did I just spend talking about bingo? And then as soon as I hit play, it's like, whoop, just disappeared out of my brain. Completely forgot about bingo. Okay, we got Bean. That we're going. I'm telling you, we're going straight up and down. That's where we're headed. Did I miss anything else? You know what? I'm gonna be obnoxious. I'm gonna go back to the beginning because I like the whole first 30 minutes was not paying attention. All right, we ready? Okay, let's try this again.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the June 9th, 2022 Pantheon Rise of the Fallen development stream. I'll get that right one of these days. I am your host, David Rohret. With me, as always, is my co-host, Anthony Guidi, aka Minus.
Hey, David. Yeah, well, and we practiced too ahead of time. That was the thing. We shouldn't have done that. Just let it go, right?
I feel like, I'm just never going to get it. But, the good news is, look who's with us tonight. Adam Mostel, aka Tehom, is with us. What's up, Adam?
A lot. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be able to talk about everything that we've had going on lately. Drop some beans. I know someone's probably got that on a bingo card out there, so you're welcome. So yeah, if you guys are ready, let's dive in.
I feel like they should have me messing up the date on the bingo card also. Anyway, that's
a good one.
Middle square,
I'm gonna write that
we got
down.
A great show as always tonight. Obviously, our main feature tonight is going to be showing off the changes to the monk class and combat in general, and we're going to go in game.
Oh, that's two bang combat and class. All right, we're off to a blazing start. This is great.
Footage of that and some really exciting stuff there. But before we get into that, we want to talk a little bit about some recent changes that we've made in-house to the race and class combinations in our first installment in a segment we'd like to call Game Updates. So here we are. Let's start out with the Druid class. We had the Archive, the Dark Mirror, the Elf, the Halfling, the Human, and the Ogre as the original starting classes. And now what's changed is we've removed the Dark Mirror from the Druid.
Really?
But don't worry, right, Adam?
Yeah, so we're not just going to take something away and not give you something in return. But just to preface some of this, so, as we've talked about updates pending for the class race matrix for a while now. So we're really excited to begin sharing them. And, there's a couple of different considerations that are coming into play here. One of them is, where do we have just kind of a shortage of good race options for some classes? Another one is actually narrative. And so in the case of Druid and the Dark Mirror, this is actually a narrative decision where, when we reflect on the relationship between the Dark Mirror and Terminus, they have a very antagonistic relation towards Terminus, right? If you read their lore, you really get that understanding that Terminus has not been the kindest world to them. And so the Druidic focus on that affinity with Terminus and with the natural world of Terminus specifically doesn't really fit that narrative. So we are giving them something else.
That's right. We are moving them to the Shaman class. We probably should have prefaced with the whole, why we're making the change. Everybody out, guess what? Your favorite class, your favorite race is no longer.
You think?
No, I'm actually really excited for this change because anyone who's been paying attention to Shaman development, really would understand that, first of all, there are a lot of water themes just going on in the Shaman kit, right? And, you're talking about Dark Mirror, what could be more perfect than the marriage of Dark Mirror and water? But even then, Shaman is a class that narratively is heavily focused on ancestry. And when you think about the Mer as this proud race that comes from a very strong ancestry, Shaman really fits that theme. Plus, there's now this really interesting connection that you can make, with the concept of water holding memory. And there's really interesting themes that we can bring out when we look at what it means to be a Darkmer shaman. So I'm really excited about this change and can't wait to see what our players think about it.
Wait a second, just jumping in. Can we tell them the truth? We just didn't want Rohret to drown, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we couldn't quite solve for that one. So
that's what I thought. That's what I thought the real thing here was. Okay, moving on, right?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so here we have the starting classes for the warrior. We have the Archive, the Darkmer, the Dwarf, the Elf, the Halfling, the Human, the Ogre, and the Scar. And what's happening here?
Yeah, we're going to get rid of Halfling warriors. Halflings are not the most robust race. So Halflings running around, in giant plate armor with giant shields. Not to say that, that wouldn't be interesting, but we think that we can give them a more thematic option. So once again, we're not removing something without giving something in return, but we're going to go ahead and give Halflings Dire Lords as their tank option. And part of this is actually because there is an existing thematic tie between Halflings and the Dire. I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but it's going to allow us to explore another narrative angle while still providing Halflings with that tank option. And especially when you consider Dire Lords as, one of our quote-unquote evil classes, now you've got a really interesting dimension to Halflings and faction. So if you've ever wanted to be an evil Halfling, now's your opportunity.
I love how you're just. We will not just take away. We will also give. You are just developing.
Yeah.
Nice. And there was a comment from Joppa about the pronunciation of Darkmer, right? That you were pronouncing it correctly. So he's happy about that. I won't speak anymore.
I'm making up for my first stream appearance.
Nice. I do like this too because Halflings have that bit of trickery, that bit of deception in them. And I think that's cool. Kind of that ties into that kind of when it goes too far, right? Like when that deception and that trickery kind of takes that next step. I like that. All right. This is a big one, David.
Yeah, so we're moving on. So no more subtractions, fear not. Now we're going to be adding some classes.
I'm actually surprised that they're actually subtracting any at all. I mean, it's good that they're adding them back elsewhere, but I mean, I guess the justifications are good. I'm just surprised. I was kind of under the impression that they would open things up more, Like, let me go back. I promise I'm not going to do this the whole time, but I want to re-listen to, like, I totally get adding shaman for Darkmer, but like, why remove druid?
So
All right. My apologies. I'm going to re-listen to this again. I was a little distracted.
The elf, the halfling, the human, and the ogre as the original starting classes. And now what's changed is we've removed the Darkmer from the druid. But don't worry, right, Adam?
Yeah. So we're not just going to take something away and not give you something in return. But just to preface some of this, so, as we've talked about updates pending for the class race matrix for a while now. So we're really excited to begin sharing them. And, there's a couple of different considerations that are coming into play here. One of them is, where do we have just kind of a shortage of good race options for some classes? Another one is actually narrative. And so in the case of Druid and the Darkmer, this is actually a narrative decision where, when we reflect on the relationship between the Darkmer and Terminus, they have a very antagonistic relation towards Terminus, right? If you read their lore, you really get that understanding that Terminus has not been the kindest world to them. And so the druidic focus on that affinity with Terminus and with the natural world of Terminus specifically doesn't really fit that narrative.
Okay.
Giving them something else.
That makes sense. Yeah, okay. Desrin says the Mir are pissed at Terminus and druids are bonded with it. Kind of doesn't make sense. Okay. Yeah, when you put it that way, that does make sense.
That's right. We are moving them to the shaman class. We probably should have prefaced with the whole why we're making the changes before we freaked everybody out. Guess what? Your favorite class is your favorite race is no longer part of this class. No.
Right. No, I'm actually really excited for this change because anyone who's been paying attention to Shaman development, really would understand that, first of all, there are a lot of water themes just going on in the Shaman kit, right? And, you're talking about Dark Myr, like what could be more perfect than the marriage of Dark Myr and water? But even then, Shaman is a class that narratively is heavily focused on ancestry. And when you think about the Myr as this proud race that comes from a very strong ancestry, Shaman really fits that theme. Plus, there's now this really interesting connection that you can make, with the concept of water holding memory. And there's really interesting themes that we can bring out when we look at what it means to be a Dark Myr Shaman. So I'm really excited about this change and can't wait to see what our players think about it.
Wait a second, just jumping in. Can we tell them the truth? We just didn't want Rohret to drown, right?
Yeah, we couldn't quite solve for that one. So
that's a really good point.
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, so here we have the starting classes for the warrior. We have the Archive, the Dark Myr, the Dwarf, the Elf, the Halfling, the Human, the Ogre, and the Scar. And what's happening here?
We're going to get rid of Halfling warriors. Halflings are not the most robust race.
Oh my god. Okay. So I know for a fact that there's somebody in the community whose username on the forums literally is Halfling Warrior. I don't know if you're watching today, Halfling Warrior, but if you are, I am sorry. I can't imagine how like gut-wrenching that must be if that's what like. And I don't think he's the only one that's like was dead set on that being their main, and then just to see it just vaporize. Ouch. Why? Okay. Why? That also doesn't. That makes even less sense to me. Because like, okay, I get they're not the most robust, but like they can still be warriors, right? Let's hear the explanation.
Halflings running around, in giant plate armor with giant shields. Not to say that, that wouldn't be interesting, but we think that we can give them a more thematic option. So once again, we're not removing something without giving something in return, but we're going to go ahead and give Halflings Dire Lords as their tank option. And part of this is actually because there is an existing thematic tie between Halflings and the Dire. I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but it's going to allow us to explore another narrative angle while still providing Halflings with that tank option. And especially when you consider Dire Lords as, one of our quote-unquote evil classes, now you've got a really interesting dimension to Halflings and faction. So if you've ever wanted to be an evil Halfling, now's your opportunity.
That's so weird to me, to be honest. Because, like, okay, again, fine, add Dire Lord, but I don't think that's a good enough reason to remove Warrior. Like, so, like, who says that they can't strap on some plate and, like, go to town? The main thing about the Halflings is that they're very juvenile and very joyful as a whole, which does not actually seem to really vibe with Dire Lord. I mean, I guess like to some extent I get, you can make these cultural stereotypes like, oh, all halflings are like childish and and playful, but like, even though that might be true by and large, it doesn't necessarily mean you aren't going to get some punk rebel, halfling that goes to the dark side essentially and turns evil. Like, I'm not saying that can't happen. But halflings are also pretty like fierce combatants, in their seething hatred for wraiths. And can't they be paladins? Well, I guess we're gonna find out by the end. Isn't that true? I'd have to you know what? I'm gonna look up the original. This would be more helpful for me to reference the old. Let me try to find like a high quality image of it. Oh, these are all small. Reference what it was originally. Okay, this is pretty decent. Oops. There we go. Okay. All right. This is the old race class matrix. Oh, whoops, I just realized I was covering up my bingo card. Geez, I gotta make sure I don't dox myself doing that. So this race class matrix was originally released in 2017. So it's been a while, okay? And we knew that there were going to be updates. Like I'm going to go ahead and call that Archai Summoner was not a race class combination in 2017, but as of the end of the stream, I'm pretty sure it's going to be, okay? That's one that Joppa confirmed in a stream a while ago. So this is what we have currently. Halflings. Oh, they can't be they cannot be paladins. Okay. I guess that makes slightly more sense. I thought they could because the paladins have a hatred for undead. Although, you know what? I'm wrong because wraiths are not actually undead. Wraiths are not undead. They are unmortal. Which is kind of the opposite of undead in a sense. Because wraiths have their souls on the outside. And so yeah, so wraiths aren't undead. So I guess that kind of makes sense. So I guess the whole shtick is that halflings can't wear plate armor, basically, is what I'm hearing, which must mean that bards can't wear plate armor. Am I extrapolating this correctly? Bards are going to probably be like a leather or chain wearing class. So they went with Dire Lord as their tank because they're a chainmail wearing tank. Am I putting this together correctly? Desmond says it has nothing to do with plate armor. That was the reason that he gave, that it doesn't make sense for a halfling to be wearing plate armor and shields and, you know, giant shields and stuff, right?
Oh.
That's what he said.
So here we have the starting classes for the warrior. We have the Archai, the Darkmer, the Dwarf, the Elf, the Halfling, the Human, the Ogre, and the Scar. And what's happening here?
Yeah, we're going to get rid of Halfling warriors. Halflings are not the most robust race. So halflings running around, in giant plate armor with giant shields. Not to say that, that wouldn't be interesting, but we think that we can give them a more thematic option. So once again, we're not
right
armor of a giant race. So halfling warriors. Halflings are not the most robust race. So
not most robust.
Running around, in giant plate armor with giant shields. Not to say that, that wouldn't be interesting, but we think that we can give them a more thematic option. So once again, we're not removing something without giving something in return, but we're going to go ahead and give halflings Dire Lords as their tank option. And part of this is actually
Wiki Wacky Woo says, to me, halflings should not be any type of tank, really, or would that be a problem with grouping around starting zones? I'm sure that has something to do with it. Halflings start in Wild's End, so Wild's End is not that close to any other starting zone. So we go to the library here in the basics. We got world and lore. This is the map King's Reach. Halflings start in Wild's End. They start kind of in this like eastern pocket of Wild's End in Sorhirith is the name of the city. And so the closest there's only 2 races that start on King's Reach. We got the humans way up here in Thronefast, and the elves over here in Fairthale. So yeah, they're not close to any other race. So like the early dungeons where you would kind of start requiring a tank would get very difficult, most likely, without a tank class. The exception to this is that the gnome class, as of the last race class matrix, I could be proven wrong by the end of the stream, but gnomes don't have a dedicated tank class because they're so focused on arcane arts. They have the summoner, which the summoner, like Earth Archimental, could theoretically do some tanking, but I think it's more likely that because the gnome starting city of Skyhold is located so close to the dwarf starting city of Kadasa, both of which are on the continent of Whitethaw. Last I knew anyway, Skyhold, it's a floating city. It's a magically floating city, and it's actually anchored in Kadasa, so it's they have pretty quick access to the dwarves of Kadasa and obviously dwarves can be tanks. Again, last I knew. That better not change. So you probably would most likely end up having having gnomes and dwarves grouping up at pretty early levels, so they can kind of complement each other that way as far as their class selection, but that's the only exception that I can think of. Anyway, this one is kind of weird. The Darkmere one, totally on board with. This one, to be determined. Let's keep going now. We're only 5 minutes in. You better buckle up, folks, because this is an hour-long stream and we got through 5 minutes. There's a lot. You were not kidding. I think Des said that, like, there's a lot to unpack in this one. You were not joking. There's a lot, but you know we're gonna trudge through it, and we're still playing bingo.
Thematic tie between halflings and the dire. I'm not going to spoil too much of it, but it's going to allow us to explore another narrative angle while still providing halflings with that tank option. And especially when you consider dire lords as, you know, one of our quote unquote evil classes. Now you've got a really interesting dimension to halflings and faction. So if you've ever wanted to be an evil halfling, now's your opportunity.
I love how you're just. We will not just take away. We will also give. You are just developing.
Yeah.
Nice. And there was a comment from Joppa about the pronunciation of Darkmere, right? That you were pronouncing it correctly. So he's happy about that. I won't speak anymore. I'm
making up for my first stream appearance.
Nice. I do like this too because halflings have that bit of trickery, that bit of deception in them. And I think that's cool. Kind of that ties into that kind of when it goes too far, right? Like when that deception and that trickery kind of takes that next step. I like that. All right. This is a big one, David.
Yeah. So moving on. So, okay.
Cleric.
So no more subtractions. Fear not. Now we're going to be adding some classes. Let's start with the cleric.
Yeah. So cleric is one of those examples.
Elf.
Where
okay, good. That's a good one.
Identified that there was a need to add some racial options. And, you know, the elves are a perfect thematic fit. They have narrative themes of preservation and protection. And as we kind of just recently talked about clerics primarily being our barrier-based, mitigative healer, elves are just a perfect choice. So I'm excited to add them to the roster.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have been asking for that one in particular, and so.
Okay. So yes, so Ronick is right. That ever since I specifically remember in 2017 when this race class matrix first came out, it was a big deal because obviously people pretty much knew nothing at that point about the race class combinations. So when that matrix first came out, and I don't think elves could be clerics or paladins, There was a lot of discussion about that. So I'm glad to see this one added in, because it does make sense. I don't even actually think they gave really like a solid reason as to why they weren't included in that first one, in that first Matrix. It was always very odd. And they were just like, like we hear you on that. And then they pretty much just left it there until today when they actually added it in. So that's good, because only 3 races for a particular class is not a lot. So more cleric options is better. The other thing, I'm gonna rewind.
And as we kind of just recently talked about clerics primarily being our barrier-based, mitigative healer, elves are just a...
Did they recently talk about that? Did I miss that? Mitigative, barrier-based mitigative healer. So like shields, if I'm interpreting that correctly. Desmond says in the developer roundtable. Okay, okay, that does ring a bell. But before that, they hadn't talked about that. I thought I remember there being, yeah. Okay, that's coming back to me now, because I'm looking at the class page, reminding myself of like what they're like. Are there any like shield abilities? So typically, what that refers to is like, there's reactive healing, and then there's kind of what you could consider proactive healing, which is just 2 sides of the same coin. Okay, so you could either try to prevent damage from being done, or you can restore damage that's already been done. And the end result is very similar in most cases. But, a mitigative type of heal would be, okay, even let's say somebody is at full health. Basic example, they have 100 hit points, and you could put a shield on them that essentially puts them at 110 out of 100 hit points. So they're over their maximum amount of hit points. And those hit points from that shield, those 10 hit points will get subtracted or absorbed before the rest of their hit points. And so, you're still, you're preventing that person from taking damage and maybe dying in some cases, as opposed to, they've taken damage and then you restore 10 hit points, you see? So it's a little bit different, but my understanding was that clerics specifically, were going to be focused more on the direct reactive healing. So the big numbers of just restoring hit points. So, somebody takes a lot of damage and you restore a lot of it, and you can't necessarily go above their maximum. But typically you can restore more like in a heal than you would be able to prevent with a shield. As far as numbers go, again, I'm just speaking in generality, but yeah, heal, armor class. Yeah, I don't see. I mean, this is not a comprehensive ability list. Okay, this is kind of a this is an example of a shield. Surround an ally with protective light, absorbing all incoming damage until the absorption limit is reached. Okay, that's basically a shield. So I guess it depends on like what extent he means. Is that going to be their primary? Is that going to be their primary form of like protecting their allies? Because I could kind of see, clerics and their divine nature, certainly having more of those types of abilities compared to a druid or shaman, but still, to make that like their primary form, as opposed to, are they going to be doing that more than they are just straight healing? Just raw like throughput of healing. That would surprise me. That would surprise me a little bit. But I don't know. I guess, these designs change. They evolve over time. So anyway, let's hear more.
So I'm excited to add them to the roster.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people have been asking for that one in particular, and so good to see that change. But that's not all. So here we have the paladin starting classes. Originally we had a
Crip Fox says, I always found clerics to be boring. I hope there's some things to make them less one-dimensional. That's a fair point, actually. Because, clerics in most games are just that straight reactive healing, like, single target, big number, restore a lot of health, and then that's pretty much it. And you end up spending a lot of time just staring at people's health bars, It's like, oh, that health bar went down. All right, select them, hit the heal hotkey. All right, their health's back, and that's pretty much it. That can be very fun with the right group and the right situation. I did it in the right game again, like I in DDO, I mained a cleric for years, and that was like my thing. I've played a lot of healers, but you're right. Like, again, in some situations, in some games, it can feel very like one-dimensional and repetitive. Again, if the design is such that you're pretty much just locked in on the UI and just watching health bars go up and down, you just do that until the fight's done. It can be kind of boring. The cleric in DDO wasn't quite that bad, or at least quite that one-dimensional. EverQuest clerics, and I played a cleric in EverQuest for a long time too. I think that they have more of a tendency to feel like that. Like, you don't really have many tools in your toolbox. So maybe giving more shielding abilities is a good way to try to kind of differentiate them from clerics in other games, and make it a little bit more active and involved if you have both of those things available to you. Like, you can shield proactively to try to prevent damage, but then also at the same time, they do have that single target direct healing for when reactive heals are necessary. So I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad, I'm not saying it's a bad move. It could be great. Just a little surprising. That's all. Because actually I've talked about this a little bit before, where like, originally coming from DDO, when into Pantheon, I was like, all right, I'm gonna play a dwarf cleric because that's my thing. That's just like what I've always played. But then the more like I read about the abilities and like thought about it and everything, the other classes started seeming a lot more interesting than just healing as a cleric. You know what I mean? Like I've talked about, I'm really, really leaning toward enchanter right now, because you still get that kind of like critical support role, but it's a little bit it seems a little bit more interesting anyway, rather than just healing. But so maybe some changes to the cleric might get me leaning back the other way. We'll see.
Human and dwarf, and we have not one, there you go, two additions there.
Yes. The interesting thing here
Darkmere
is that
Paladin.
If you look at this now,
interesting.
All of our clerics, all of our races that can be clerics are now also able to be paladins.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Again, just identifying
Makes sense.
that paladin could benefit from those extended racial options. But again, also, fitting back into the themes that make sense for each of these races. So we just talked about elves and that desire for preservation and protection. But even when we talk about the Mer, they are a proud and noble race, or their origins are this proud and noble race specifically that, was created to fight these ancient leviathans in the depths of their home world. So drawing that out and even giving them an opportunity, almost this redemptive arc in returning to that origin point through the paladin, Again, another really interesting narrative path that we can take, and excited to see it.
Yep. And as our
That's cool because again, 2 options for Paladin. I remember that being a big sticking point too. It's like that's not enough. Like there would hardly be any Paladins in the world, So double the amount of options now, which I think is cool, and also makes a lot of sense that every race that can be a cleric can also be a Paladin. That was kind of confusing before because that wasn't always the case, because they did say that according to the lore, if you weren't aware, that Paladins used to be clerics. Okay, we're speaking in the lore. Every Paladin used to be a cleric, and so you think of the cleric. They are really connected to their tomes, and really, really devoted to the reading and the study and the connection with their deity through that. But then there's some sort of event in that cleric's life that then, as Joppa would describe it, spurs them to lay down the tome and take up the sword and take more of a hands-on approach, if you will, to and particularly, as I was saying earlier, against undead. Paladin rock against undead. That is their thing, seeking them out, hunting the undead and slaughtering them. So again, good. This is a good change.
Our chat just recognized Paladins now have a presence on Rainfall, so that's good news for that content.
So
that's
we're adding
cool
more
too.
elves to the world, huh? That's great. All right, so let's get to the next one.
It is a little bit again a Dark Mirror Paladin. I can see it, because again, it is important to remember, as we were just talking about earlier, like Dark Mirror they're not like pure evil. They're really, I think it's the best way to think about it is they're more just like bitter. They're kind of a bitter people, which can be off-putting to a lot of the other races. But yeah, there's really not that much of a stretch, again, to being kind of like a bitter race, and then also taking on that kind of vengeant lifestyle of a paladin if it's for a just cause. I can see it. All right, we're at Ranger now.
Just wait till we have the bear class. You're gonna love that.
It's gonna be scary.
Okay, so here we have the Ranger, and the starting classes were the Elf, the Halfling, and the Human, and we'll be adding an addition of the Scar.
What?
Yeah, I'm also really, I'm excited about all these. Like I really am, but this one in particular, the Scar are this predatory hunter race, and so when you think about the Ranger toolkit, when you think about the fact that they have tracking and trapping and foraging and all those other staples, it's just a fit, right? There's just no denying it. But the other interesting side of this is, there is an angle to the Ranger, and we did have some debate about this, where they do have this kind of affinity and this bond with nature, right? They're actually creating these bonds with animals and with the spirits of the wild. And what this ultimately comes down to is how we can reinterpret that, right? So it's not like we're changing the Ranger class kit, but from a narrative perspective, when you think about what it means to be a Scar Ranger, we can explore this angle of it's not actually harmonizing with nature, it's subjugating it. And again, just a really neat thread that we can pull on. And yeah.
Very cool. I definitely think a lot of people are going to have some second thoughts about what they were going to do with the Rangers now. Okay.
Interesting.
So now we have the Summoner, and we have the the Dark Mirror, the Elf, the Gnome, and the Human as the original starting. And now we're at...
There it is. Called it.
The Archive.
That's the Archive.
Yeah.
Casey.
Well, you said Archive first, so you got yourself all twisted there.
Yeah. Again, another choice that just kind of seemed to make sense. The Archive already have kind of a powerful presence in wizardry, and summoning is, another facet of that, right? It's an extension of their relationship to this manipulation of raw magic. But again, there's also this interesting narrative opportunity that we have here where we can explore another dimension of this race and its culture and its relationship to this class, where, you know, you have the archive that are themselves these physical, tangible manifestations of an energy. And now we get to kind of explore, what does it mean? Like, how do they view, you know, a faction of themselves that have taken it on to actually bind other energies into forms for the sake of servitude? So I'm really excited about some of the tension that's going to occur there as well. You know, we talked about the tension of something like the Darkmere Cleric in the past, and I see a similar opportunity here where, you know, they're kind of in line with the race, but separated in a way that the rest of the race kind of views them, you know, is just not quite the same. You know, there's a little bit of distrust there, there's a little bit of disdain, and I'm excited to see it.
For sure.
Yeah, Archive.
So then here's the
Archive Summoner makes total sense. Always has make total sense given their affinity to elements, and so I might actually make one of those as an alt. It's pretty cool.
Updated race class matrix, and we'll have this up on our website soon enough.
Good.
As well as the races will be updated with the new icons and the, you know, what classes they represent moving forward. You know, I encourage you to come check it out. The website is, you know.
Is this a hold on? So Matrix is great. Is this a joke though? Like, how can I zoom in on this? Is it not? God damn. All right. And let me at least move this. Okay. You see, it's really small. You see down here? Let me make sure I'm right about this before I say something stupid. Oh, it's not on that version. This is gonna make sense. Give me 1 second. Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, you see how at the bottom there's a little typo? It says denotes Strec goal class. STRECH. Okay, typo. No big deal, right? Okay, typos happen. They missed a T. STRETCH is how it should be spelled. Okay, let's go back to the old one that was released in 2017, however. Let's scroll to the bottom of this one. Whoops. Denotes Stetch goal class. Do they not? How can they misspell stretch wrong twice in two different ways? It went from Stetch to Strek. Like, how does that happen? It's not even a copy paste. They misspelled it wrong twice, both times in different ways. That's that is, oh my god, that is hilarious to me. Because I remember I saw this like a long time ago. I was like, okay, they misspelled stretch. Like, whatever happens, like, hope whenever they update it, hopefully they fix that typo. And they put the R in, but then they drop the T. It's like, it seems so unlikely. It's like, is this like a joke among, like, is this like a VR inside joke that like we're all just not aware of? What in the world? All right, I'm sorry. That was just that's just something that only I noticed. Okay, doesn't matter. Let's keep going.
Where you can pledge and be part of the Pantheon community. You know, I think a lot of a lot of fun happens in our Discord channel, and I think if people knew exactly how much fun there was being had, they'd probably be trying to get in a little sooner. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the changes overall. Minus what? First, let's go to you. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think the standout to me, and it's not for me as a player, like I'm gonna actually say standout that I think is exciting for the community, is the Paladin being not just one extra race, but two. I think it's a really popular class across all fantasy. And I think it was a little restrictive when we looked at just being able to be human or dwarf. So giving people a little bit more with it. And Adam, you're free to talk about this if you want to correct me here. But what's interesting about our Paladin compared to many other games is that the Paladin sort of has left the cleric culture, right? They have sort of their own ideals, and they're kind of looking to enact a little judgment, a little redemption. They're sort of like a redeemer style Paladin. They're not like the do everything right. They want to really conquer evil, and it's a little anger filled. And I think that having a dark mirror in that is interesting. So, I mean, anything further you want to add on that? Because that's what I'm most excited about.
No, I mean, I think you summed it perfectly. Our Paladins are absolutely a little bit more of that, avenging kind of style, really kind of not passively protecting, but actively hunting out and rooting out evil. And yeah, I mean, the degree to which there's that kind of proactive nature that can lean into some of the fury and the resentment that the Darkmer hold. And certainly even the elves, right? The elves have their whole history of how they've kind of diminished over time, and are, trying to, in some ways, retreat. But then you also have these other faction of elves that are actually kind of going out back into the world and, actually.
Sorry, I'm going to get rid of my sidebar here.
In some cases, rooting out evil. Like, it's literally, if you go back to the elf page, it kind of says that specifically. And it's a perfect fit.
I think the thing that I am enjoying about all this is everything is rooted in the lore. It wasn't just changes to make for change's sake. It all made sense logically with the stuff that we're trying to accomplish as far as making the world feel immersive. And there you go, where somebody probably has that on their bingo card. So yeah, I think that's what I'm enjoying about the changes in general.
Yeah. I mean, we've always said that we are a lore-based game, right? We have the roots of everything that we do in the narrative, and we make sure that we are honoring the story that our narrative team is creating. And I personally, I've kind of mentioned in the past that I have a background in role-playing, and I personally appreciate that that's our approach, because I'm able to relate back to that, when I'm doing any work that I'm doing on the design front, and just the way that we built out that relationship.
Grizzly says lore reading. That's a fair question. When I put lore reading, I was imagining, like sometimes like JN Gerhardt will like read, like it will be like a cut scene directly to just reading the lore, like in its original documents, or maybe Minus or Ronick will read something verbatim that JN Gerhardt wrote that is like explaining the lore. Do you guys think though? Right, so Mordred says they're not reading lore, they're just talking about it. Like, there is a difference. Like, do you think that explaining lore, like, is that a lore reading? It's lore discussion, but it's not reading, like, the lore as it was originally written, I don't know. I'm going to stick, I'm going to, even though there's no prizes, I'm going to be strict. I'm going to say this is not a lore reading.
The way that we can communicate on that front. It's just been incredible. It's creating such a rich tapestry for the world, and I keep saying the word excited, but there's no better word. Everything about this just has me excited.
That's got to be. I'm putting that one on bingo too.
Of everything that we're doing.
We're gonna have to have you back on another time to talk about your background in role playing. But in the meantime, we're gonna head over to our next segment, and just remember, actually, Minus, we're gonna probably take some questions at the end here. So
we're gonna give a Q&A.
Matrix until after.
We're gonna get that Q&A segment, later.
Which we're excited to kind of get right into.
Oh yeah, you're right. Oh, excited.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Excited it's in bingo. It's just not on my card again because all the cards are different. So that would have been a good one. That would have been a good one for me to have. Oh well. I'm not doing that great. We're like a quarter of the way through, and I've got 3. It's like that's not good. It's not great. Let's hope we hit a bunch off in this next segment here.
Enjoy, and like I said, get those questions in there, and hopefully afterwards we'll have some time for you. Here we go.
Des says I'm actually sad because I got to leave before you get to the quote unquote good part. Ooh, what does that mean? I'm sorry you have to leave. I'm also sorry that I'm being so verbose. It's been an hour. You probably would have expected to get through more than 15 minutes of the stream after an hour. But we're on track for a 4-hour stream at this point. But I'm gonna have to pick it up because to be honest, I have it's magic night for me tonight with my family. So I mean, I do have somewhere to be later, so I can't. I don't think I can take 4 hours to get through this stream. Let's keep cranking.
Yep.
Class is in session.
So I think it's safe to say we're excited to show some in-game footage highlighting the updates to the monk class as well as combat in general. It's been a top.
Ooh, gameplay. Is that? Do I have that in-game footage? Hey, boom, there we go. Also, Loxulus says he said robust when describing halflings wearing plate armor. He did? God damn. Are you like trolling me right now? Because now I gotta go look. I gotta get every square. I gotta get every square I can. All right, we're at 1537 right now. Okay, we're gonna skip back.
Moving on, right?
And we're gonna.
Yeah, let's move on.
I might have completely missed it.
Okay, so here we have the starting classes for the warrior. We have the archive, the dark mirror, the.
I'll even speed it up a little bit.
The halfling, the human, the ogre, and the scar. And what's happening here?
Yeah, we're gonna get rid of halfling warriors. Halflings are not the most robust race.
Oh, dude, you're right. Nice call. They're not the most robust race. Wow. All right, totally missed that one. I knew I was gonna miss some. All right. We're back. We're going back. I'm gonna go back to normal speed. All right.
2 newsletters, as well as the most recent developers roundtable. I do want to make sure to note that what you're seeing is in development footage on a real playable server. That said, things are subject to change, and there's a lot of work going into world building and art. So please keep that in mind when we give you an early taste of something. With that said, Minus, you spent a lot of time playing the monk recently. Why don't you get us started?
Yeah, sure thing. So, Adam, you've talked recently about the changes to the monk. Playing through the early experience on the class multiple times myself, I'm actually really feeling growth now as I level much more substantially than in our previous tests. So with the skill leveling system in place for.
Also, I just noticed, sorry, I'm not going to interrupt the gameplay. I don't like interrupting gameplay too much and talking over it. So we'll focus on it to make sure we really absorb it. But I just got to point out, I am 1 away from bingo already, which is not bad. And I told you, it's the straight up and down. We got that in-game footage. Now I just need them to say onward and upward, which actually, now that I think about it, because Joppa is not on this stream, he's usually the one that says that. It would be a home run if he was on the stream, but the chances of one of the other ones saying that, not so likely, I would say, actually. So I don't know. I don't need to get a whole bunch of X's. I only need 5. So maybe that might not be so bad after all.
For combat, both offensively and defensively. Do you feel that these are sort of the major pieces that have impacted this feel of growth? And can you sort of explain how players are going to feel this impact when they get in?
Absolutely. At a fundamental level, we've gone through and refined our governing combat formulas to make sure that the individual events in combat, hits, crits, dodges, blocks, everything that you can think of that can occur, they're weightier than they ever were before, right? And we've adjusted our baseline so that players can expect to see these events also more frequently than they have in previous tests. Skills, of course, are feeding into this, right? Because they're governing the likelihood of these events occurring. Now that our skill system is online, it really emphasizes that feeling of power progression, not only because you're seeing the incremental improvements within your current level, but also as you're going up against enemies that have, higher or lower relative skill levels. And you can really feel those differentials now through that frequency and the potency of the combat events.
Well, I've noticed that when going after enemies of my same level or maybe 1 level less, that downtime is there. But I've also noticed changes to benefiting from sitting and food buffs. Can you talk a little bit about these items?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely increased downtime from previous pre-alpha sessions. Downtime is one of those controversial things that can yield mixed reactions from MMO players. We've sort of been conditioned to expect that, we can remain in a fight indefinitely or move immediately from one encounter to the next. But really, having some form of downtime is extremely vital to Pantheon's design on a number of fronts. I find that often players will recall moments of downtime as opportunities to recalibrate with their team or socialize, and that's absolutely true and important and definitely a pillar that we're leaning on. But there's also bigger design considerations that come from what downtime means when related to the actual experience of combat. The most fundamental of which is resource management. The more mana you're burning through in a given encounter, the more time you're spending to recuperate before the next one. One thing that we're emphasizing with our downtime model is the concept of investment. The more time that you spend resting, the more health and mana you're going to recover with each tick. This creates a paradigm where even though you may have generated the resources that you need for those immediate moments.
Mordred says pre-alpha, okay for alpha. I mean, he did say the word alpha. You know what? So again, thank you. I don't know what I would do without you guys. This has ended up being a lot harder. There's a lot to keep track of here. This is a lot harder than I thought. So I'm glad you guys got my back. I'm gonna go ahead and take that one.
Moments, you're actually incentivized to weigh taking action now against the unrealized gains of continuing to rest. Right. So as soon as you stop resting, that clock resets and you're back to your baseline recovery rate the next time that you do sit down to rest. And so, you really feel like, okay, if I need this mana, I can sit down, I can rest through it. But depending on how this fight goes, if I just hang in there for another 5-10 seconds, I'm going to get exponentially greater gains than if I just stand up, cast, and sit back down. That being said, like most aspects of Pantheon, we really want to provide players with agency where we can, right? And downtime is absolutely included in that. So as players are progressing their characters, as they're acquiring new items, buffs, we're going to be providing them with tools and options to mitigate some of this downtime. And the neat thing about this is because resting means you aren't taking other actions, we can lean into the potency of this a bit more than we can for something like passive regeneration, where, you're actually regenerating while you're up and engaged in a fight without negatively disrupting balance. So food is one really accessible area where players can express this agency. Where food was previously treated as something that you needed to actively consume every time you wanted to speed up your regeneration rates, right? You ended a combat encounter and you clicked your food and you sat down, and sometimes you clicked another piece of food. Right now, we're actually looking at food as a long-term consumable buff solution. So, it's something that you can craft or you can buy. You use it from your inventory, and then you have this effect that's persisting for duration. Right now we have that hovering at 30 minutes as a baseline. To get players acclimated to all this, we're actually starting them out with a small stack of food, enough to last them their very first few hours, and that provides a very basic increase to their resting regeneration. It's a small amount, +1 to the health and mana gains with each tick, but when you're looking at recovering, 30 or so health that you have as level 1 player, that number really adds up. But we're designing this in a way where food is complementary to the mechanic, not the foundation of it. And so, in fact, not all food is even going to provide this regeneration benefit, right? So if you run out of food or you want to leverage a different food buff, or you just need to spend your money on something else, it's not like you're going to be out of the game as a result, right? It just means that you're managing your resources a little more carefully or a little bit differently than if you had food to serve as that regenerative pack.
That's awesome. And I like that it's, a piece of it, not just the only thing that's going to help you regenerate. I like that a lot. So before we get into like the nitty gritty of
that, looked like concept art to me. Like animation. That's it. I'm gonna go ahead and take concept art for that. Those are like concept art for animations for some of the monk attack animations. Speaking of animations, welcome Chromacore. Thanks for joining.
Help you regenerate. I like that a lot. So before we get into like the nitty gritty of monk skills, because I do want to talk to you about that and talking about how that growth of the skills feels, I know that we've been very quick to get our new animations in for monk staff attacks that players can see on the screen actually right now. Can you give us some insight on how this process is going and what to expect moving forward with our animations?
You can expect a lot of awesome animations, I can say that much. With the growth of our art team, we've actually been able to take an improved approach to how we handle animations, right? How we plan for them and how we execute on them. Now, starting from the design side of things, where we're making decisions about the kind of techniques and abilities and spells that are going into the game, we're actually able to sit with our artists and, hash out the movement and the timing and the theme that we want to encapsulate. And, we showcase the product of this, is some of that work in our main newsletter. And so what you're seeing now is how we've translated those concepts into functional animations. Suffice to say, the process is going extremely well. We're very happy with these animations. We're, of course, able to work much more efficiently now, right? Because we can lock in the poses that are making up our animation keyframes through quick iterations of concept artists, right? Instead of having to animate in real time. And especially now that we've gone through this process a few times and have been able to really lock in our needs for things like animation timing, all of that information is just feeding right back into the process, and it's just giving us an even clearer sense heading as to what our needs are going to be for future animations. As for what to expect moving forward, the next focus is on cleaning up our combat animation suite. So idle stances, auto attacks, casting animations, and then bringing those things up to the level of polish that we've been able to reach with the monk staff animations. We'll eventually be adding bespoke animations for other techniques. And
this is much cooler. I was gonna say, I was gonna chime in and say that like the animations themselves are cool, but they probably should have picked a cooler NPC to show them using those abilities against. Because like the gray box bear and deer weren't really doing it for me, but I like this model. This guy's cool.
Weapon types. But now that we've reached a good place with our first set of techniques, we would rather focus on making sure that the foundational animations for combat are feeling solid before we move on.
So obviously we've talked about our sprint skill. This is the first time we're showing it. This is another animation that's been added in and worked on. I personally find I can't live without it. Can you talk about the addition of sprint?
Hold on, did that fox just gave a debuff called scent mark? Does that mean that fox literally just peed on him? Is it? Is it because like I'm pretty sure fox pee smells real bad. It's like, it kind of reminds me of like in EQ, you remember like skunks would like spray you and you'd get like a skunk smell debuff. I don't even remember what it did. I don't know, it probably decreased your charisma or something. Like I remember as like a little kid, I was like, like 5 years old, and for whatever reason my family told me like, don't attack skunks because they'll make you stink. I was like, oh, okay, I don't want to stink. They're like, nobody will talk to you. We're like, oh god. So now we got foxes peeing. Great. Love it.
Sprint skill. This is the first time we're showing it. This is another animation that's been added in and worked on. I personally find I can't live without it. Can you talk about the addition of sprint and how it affects a player in travel and combat?
Yeah, so I spoke earlier about that desire that we have to provide players with agency, and sprinting is really just another dimension of that, right? Where we're providing players with this tool to, move at an increased speed. Right? That's what sprint is doing. Yep. But as anyone who's familiar with kiting knows, movement is a very powerful tool, right? And so how and when players are choosing and able to leverage this tool, right, leveraging sprinting, is going to depend on their circumstances, whether that's just going from point A to B more quickly or trying to move past a dangerous patrol before they get caught by it, or actually employing it, right, for something like kiting or repositioning, or, maybe you pulled aggro, and I guess this is just another form of kiting, right? But even if you just pulled aggro and you need your tank to chase after something, you can use sprint as an option to save yourself those few extra seconds that could be critical to survival. Endurance, right, which was originally our melee combat resource. After the introduction of readiness, we're repurposing endurance for movement and travel-oriented things like sprinting and climbing. And so you now have this added layer of how that choice to sprint is going to come at the cost of something else. So maybe you're sprinting to avoid getting hit by an attack or two as you try to run away, right? As you try to run to a guard, but you're not familiar with the area. And now all of a sudden you're coming up on a ledge. And because you spent all this time sprinting, you no longer have the endurance to climb that ledge, right? And so even though you avoided those first...
Climbing? Is that close enough? I'll let chat be the judge. I should have just made it just climb rather than climbing on the card, to be honest. I mean, it's like laying on the same thing. I kind of am tempted to just take it. Any objections? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Mordred says close enough. All right, let's go.
First couple of hits. Now you're at this dead end. You've cost yourself, your long-term survival for that short-term safety. And, now you've made your bed and you have to lie in it, right? So we're really trying to encourage and reward more situational and environmental awareness like that. So it's really important for us to look at sprinting not only as a travel mechanic, but as a combat tactic as well, and really be aware of how resource consumption and regeneration is cascading into gameplay. So, if sprinting is too available, suddenly everyone can kite, right? Or everyone can avoid danger. And if it's too limited, then it's not really a choice that's worth making. Some of this is going to come down to things like having variable regeneration rates in and out of combat, where the effectiveness of sprinting changes depending on if you're using it as a travel mechanic as opposed to a tactical one. But this is another area where we're also looking at itemization and buffs and all those various tools that we have to give players more control over how they engage with and utilize the mechanic. In fact, sprinting is actually now the focal point for our movement speed buffs, because it allows us to look at those buffs through more dimensions than just how fast are you moving, and think about them from the angles of consumption and regeneration as well. Right. And this actually helps us solve a problem where, for a game where we don't want players to just summon a mount out of thin air and move at incredible speeds and bypass the world, flat movement increasing buffs really just provide that same benefit in a different context. So by tying those kinds of buffs back to sprinting, we can still provide those benefits, but we can do it in a way that's actually interwoven with more aspects of character development and gameplay rather than just overlaid on top. And so that still leaves room to encourage and reward players to engage with free mounting as well, right? Because now you can buff your sprinting, right? You can buff your movement speed, but it's not the end-all be-all solution.
Sounds good. So the art updates and the speed that they're happening, in my
Also, wasn't he talking about crafting? Did I also miss crafting earlier? This is hard, guys. I'm telling you. When he was talking about food, and how food through the I think he was talking about like the provisioner profession, how it's normally something that is crafted. You want them to you would want crafters to be able to make something of value, so it makes sense to have food be more valuable. Oh, he mentioned food but not crafting. Okay, maybe I injected that myself. Maybe I'm just, because I just made those videos about the crafting system and food, so maybe I was getting a little mixed up. All right, anyway, sorry.
In my opinion, are extremely impressive. Obviously, since we have the talent of our new team members on the team, we're just really seeing that now affect progress. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about monk skills. Now you start in your monk experiences hand to hand, and you start with a technique called Iron Palm, and it's just fists. This uses readiness, so this is a technique for fists. You also start with a staff technique called Strike. Now in my playtime, it's taken some time to save up to buy a staff, unless of course you're fortunate enough to find one on an enemy. But I found myself mostly using Iron Palm whenever I could, because it was a really nice boost to damage. You can also start with an ability that works from a ranged, like pulling, or just to get to a safe spot, called Soul Shuriken, which uses chi. So now personally, I enjoyed the ability to pull to safety at an early level, because I quickly found out like a wolf snuck up on me, or maybe I accidentally multi-pull, but I was in a world of trouble in both those scenarios. So it feels like even at level 1, it's active, right? Like these are active abilities as 2 abilities that take different resources. It feels like a big change to some of the early class play in previous sessions. So was this intentional to allow the player to feel a little more active?
Yeah, 100%. Especially for our non-casters, there's kind of this balance that we need to strike between trying to slow down the overall actions per minute, in pursuit of that more tactical gameplay, but still provide those players, again, with that sense of agency and things that they can actually do in combat while they're waiting for those resources to build. And so that's part of where that distinction between readiness and unique class resources comes into play. So you've got readiness as your technique resource.
I don't know how I feel about the changes to the UI of like the floating text and like the font that they're using. I don't know if it's like just too big. It's always so tough to find the right line between like you 100% want to provide the player with like feedback and information as to what's going on, particularly in combat. What's happening, how much damage you're doing, but you want to be able to provide that feedback conveniently, but also not have it be too distracting. And I don't know in this case if it's just because they recently changed it by changing the font or making it a little bit bigger, that's why it's extra distracting to me. But I don't know. That's just my impression. I don't know if you. I don't know how you guys. I don't know how you feel about that. Thorndeep says you'll be able to toggle it. Oh, I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. Hopefully, actually, not only can you toggle it, hopefully you would be able to even adjust like the font size and the font. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to do that. Yeah, anything like on the UI side that it doesn't affect anybody else how you view it, like that, you know, they should give as many options as possible. So it's just, I mean, it's just something that I noticed just about this stream in particular.
So, you know, it's really the primary resource for most of your weapon-based attacks, but it's generating at a pretty measured pace. And it's something that's primarily outside of the player's control in terms of how they acquire it beyond, you know, do I have enough hit rating to connect my attacks, right? And so it's really demanding players to monitor it and weigh that option of, you know, do I spend it as soon as I have it, or do I save it for something bigger or for a string of attacks?
Okay, technically he said soon. He said as soon as I have it. So not really the context I was imagining soon coming up, but again, I said he uttered the word. I'm gonna go ahead and take it. I'm really I'm hanging on onward and upward right now. That would give me double bingo. It's I'm really counting on them for that one.
Class resources come in to give players options in between or in tandem with techniques. So typically these are resources that are generating at a more reliable pace than readiness does, or that players actually have direct influence over how they generate, and sometimes both, but they're tied to more fundamental class skills. So in the case of the monk, you know, you've got these chi manipulating skills like Soul Shuriken or Chi Spear, and these are actually providing avenues for monks to weave in additional damage, which, you know, it helps create that activity between technique execution. But then at higher levels, there's actually going to be a need to weigh that additional damage against things like opening your chakra gates or activating cooldowns. So we're almost applying a little bit of fighting game philosophy here, where we're giving players this option to stay active for the sake of being active. And sometimes, you know, in a fighting game, you can get away with button mashing, but really it's building your knowledge of the game and making those more informed and conscientious choices about when and why to take certain actions. That's really going to take you that much further.
All right, I'm going to get a little more in the weeds here on monk abilities, kind of dig in a little bit. But upon gaining a few levels, the monk receives Resonating Impact and Wandering Fist. Now, Resonating Impact is a universal technique, which I found interesting because it works with any weapon. I really liked the feel of that and thinking of how, you know, possible universal techniques can work across different weapon loadouts in the future. But another thing I loved about this level was the choice actually started to become really important. Not even more so.
Minus gets jumped by a bear.
To give a bit more clarity on these abilities, Resonating Impact would return damage done as health back to the monk. And wow, was this huge when it came to soloing in those early levels and helping, you know, kind of time that out. It used readiness and it carries a good cooldown. So I didn't really find myself able to use it, you know, more than twice maybe in a long fight. But that said, I would have to plan it out so that the health back would be impactful because it would be a nice attack. But I also needed to make sure I had the readiness available so I couldn't just start mashing Iron Palm to do more damage. It made the early gameplay again feel more interactive. That's further evident with Wandering Fist, which was a really interesting skill in my opinion because it plays off the open chakra gates thing a little bit. You know, early on, just kind of talks about it. But at this level, it's a quick low damage strike and then turns, you know, that ability into a guaranteed evade of the next attack. So this really became about timing. And there were a few enemies that after fighting for a while I was leveling, I learned these abilities that would apply like a bleed or a debuff to me and realized that if physical, now not for everything, I couldn't avoid, you know, casting and such, but I could use this ability to evade it. What I liked about this was that I sort of had to be prepared. I, again, couldn't just mash my damage abilities because of the global cooldown. And I needed enough time to to hit the Wandering Fist. And then, you know, that evade comes up after. So I needed the time to hit the ability, then hit the evade. If I planned it correctly, when that attack was ready to come, it really felt amazing to negate it and save some downtime. I say this because as we talk about earlier in this conversation, feeling active is important, but in this case, it was a bit of inactiveness and waiting that made me feel like I was more prepared and I was more, I don't know, skilled in my fighting. Am I getting the right vibe here from like how I'm interpreting this and how this is laid out?
Yeah, I'm smiling as you're describing this because this is so much. This is the heart of what we want to see out of combat in Pantheon, and I'm so glad that you were able to feel that in that early monk experience. You know, this is a great example of what I mentioned earlier with regards to being active through button mashing versus being active through that mental engagement and decision making, right? Because you're not just using your abilities because they're available or because it's an optimal rotation. You're actually attentive to what's happening in the moment. You know, you're attentive to the state of your resources, and you're developing that awareness of, you know, what could still occur in the fight before it ends. And so really knowing your enemies and your skills and even your teammates and what your teammates bring to the table. I mean, those are the differentiators, not just between failure and success, but even just efficiency and risk mitigation. So this even calls back to the comment about downtime, right? Because now you have this agency to use your resources in a way that you're actively mitigating downtime. You know, maybe it means that a fight takes 5 seconds longer because you're not using your most powerful abilities, but the abilities that you are using are, you know, if in the example of Resonating Impact where you're returning health, maybe that saves you 20 or 30 seconds of downtime before the next fight. And so, you know, there's a value add there. And as we layer in more and more of those decision points, right, and more challenging enemy abilities, and especially in a group scenario where you've got, you know, combos and state manipulation, the combination of all of those decisions in concert with one another, that can be the difference between being ready to handle, you know, a sudden add or a bad pull and a full wipe. And I mean, that is exactly what we want to see. That is exactly what we're driving towards. And I'm just grinning ear to ear that you felt that.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I love hearing about all the layers and everything that's gone into the monk class, and we've been focused on it a lot recently because of the work on, you know, since the pre-alpha feedback and just the techniques and stuff. There's a lot of fans of other classes out there, though, that want to hear about their classes. And I was hoping you could comment quickly on the fact that while the monk has been highlighted here, work is being done with the other classes too.
You know, we're paying a lot of attention to the monk right now, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the state of the other classes from a technical point of view. And really, it just is the fact that the monk happens to be better positioned for us to show off things like animations. The other classes are definitely still getting love and attention, and I'm not nerfing them to the ground, I promise. So on the melee side of that, you know, the Dire Lord and the Rogue, the main emphasis has been on developing their techniques, right, and making sure that each weapon type is adequately delivering on the identity that we're creating for it, while also ensuring that things like class resources, you know, Monk Chi as an example here, and the abilities that are related to those feel good to use and are interacting in ways that are meaningful with techniques. Casters are a little bit different. You know, they're driven more universally by mana as a resource, and so they're a little bit more susceptible to downtime. They also have access to a much wider range of buffs, debuffs, you know, state manipulation, things that are melee. Typically, you know, they may have access, but it's not as readily available. It might be, you know, more technique dependent. And so given how we've adjusted things like resistances, raw spell potency, you know, while we're letting our melee classes be our proving ground for techniques, for casters, we're really much more focused on where the numbers need to land for things like mana costs, cooldowns, and spell potency.
So are all skeletons like radioactive now? Like they all glow in the dark? Because it looks cool. I just like, I would... Like, is there something special about these skeletons? Why they are glowing? I'm also glad that they're starting to, well, they're like duoing, kind of starting to group up and add some more other players into the mix. Because to me, this is probably a better, more accurate representation of quote unquote real gameplay, in the sense that like when it's just you know, rewind like 5 minutes when it's just minus like you know, soloing some low level mobs, it's like, yes, that, I mean, that would absolutely happen. You know, you could do that, you know, especially when you're first starting off. You probably are going to be soloing some things, and to be honest with you, in low level, if you don't have a ton of abilities, like, yeah, it's not going to be like the most fast-paced combat you've ever seen by by any means. And I get in this stream, it is probably useful to really boil it down to the basics to actually get, this is kind of like a more in-depth breakdown of monk combat. So that, you know, they're really explaining each ability and you can really see each ability work on its own. It's easier to see that when you don't have the distractions of a whole bunch of other things going on. And you know, and you're just focusing on that one person, but you know that, so you know, yeah, so while that does happen, really the bread and butter of Pantheon's gameplay is more cooperative, you know, and reacting to what your teammates are doing and that whole group experience. So I'm glad, you know, they're duoing now. Maybe hopefully later they'll add in even more people, show kind of like a full group scenario to get the whole gambit. Because again, you know, on some days maybe you will be soloing, some days you may be duoing, and some days you'll have full groups. All depends on what you're doing.
So that we can ensure that they feel adequately powerful, you know, without tipping the scales too far in either direction. What this does, though, is it creates a really great opportunity.
I also like that they showed daytime and they're showing nighttime now, and it is really dark. Like, I don't think that's just the gamma on my screen. It is tough because I've got these bright soft boxes for the sake of my camera on either side of the screen that I'm watching it on. So there's a little bit of glare from those that makes it, I think, a little bit harder for me to see in person. But I mean, checking my other screen here, that does still look pretty dark. Obviously, if I was just playing on my own, not streaming, I wouldn't have these soft boxes on, so it might be a little bit easier to see then. But which is actually kind of like something interesting to keep in mind. Like, I might actually put me at a disadvantage if night is going to be this like pitch black. I like it though. I like how, you know, you can clearly see the light emitted from Tahome's torch, and then, you know, you're really counting on these skeletons to glow to even know where they are. So that's unique. That's unique
For us
sure.
to nail down their distinct identities. So, you know, for example, with the wizard, we want to make sure that they're really delivering on that glass cannon fantasy. And for something like the shaman, we want to give them the right mix of healing and buffing and debuffing ability so that they can really live up to their class fantasy without being outshone by more dedicated healers. You know, with the exception of Bard and Necromancer, all of our classes, not just these 6, they have their kits plotted out all the way up to level 50. But I do want to make it clear that, you know, the primary emphasis right now has been on the implementation and balancing up through level 10 for the classes that we do have online. And we're actually getting ready now to push that to level 20, right? So those abilities are coming online, we're balancing them, but really, you know, we're spending a lot of time in this area in particular and really honing in on that beginning experience again, because combat is such a fundamental part of how players experience the game. And, you know, our tools are great. It takes very little time, you know, minutes at most, to create a new ability on a functional end. Obviously, you know, animation and visual effects and audio are totally different ballgame. But when it comes to just like wiring in, I press a button and it does a thing, that can be done very quickly. But making sure that those abilities feel good in gameplay, right, and interact well with the rest of the kits, that is a much more nuanced process. And so rather than bloat the class kits with every single idea that's on the table, right now we're really focused on those fundamentals, because as we flesh these things out and as we're getting data and feedback from our testers, you know, as we are identifying the adjustments that we need to do, all of that work is now building the foundation that we can use to grow those kits out further and bring the remaining classes online with much better confidence that our math is where it needs to be and that we're really providing the right abilities at the right levels. So, you know, it lets us implement, it lets us iterate more quickly, and we don't need to spend as much time on rework.
Well, it's really great to show off in-game footage of all this action after we've been talking about it for a bit now. And I have to say, for what it's worth, I've greatly enjoyed this early level experience, and I've played through it multiple times. I like how engaging it is, and I think our community, especially Monk fans, are going to love it. What do you think about taking some questions from the community?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Oh, are we going to get a Q&A in chat?
All right, so we're going to take some questions here in a minute. You know, like I said, this is me stepping aside from being a dev for a minute and as a player. And I just want to say, like, I went into just sort of test things out and see how the new monk changes were. And next thing you know, it was 4.5 hours later. So, you know, it's a testament to how fun, not just, you know, it's not just about fancy animations or like, you know, gameplay techniques. It's really about enjoyment and fun. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that again, just super happy to hear that you guys enjoyed it as much as you did. even just rewatching the footage, I was enjoying it because, you know, I can see, I know everything that you're doing, right? I know everything that I expect you to do and what's going on in combat. But just the way that you're playing was really fun for me to watch and see how everything is beginning to come together, or is coming together rather. Yeah, so thank you guys for taking a crack at it and breaking it and not dying as much as I expected you to.
You just didn't get to see those. That's all. Me and David had quite a bit of dying, right, David?
I mean,
when we were playing together.
Yeah. I mean, healer would have been nice, you know.
So
he always blames the healer. I'm gonna go ahead and call that a dead Ronick joke. We're gonna go ahead and take that one.
Ahead and community in the chat, please. And if
Thorndeep, I think he did say excited, but I don't have that on my bingo card, unfortunately. I wish I did, because that would have been a gimme.
If you're not here seeing these live, you can always catch it on YouTube, but you do miss some fun in chat. So try to make it scheduled once a month. You guys can get our calendar that comes out on Twitter and all of our social media feeds. Usually, David? Probably like the last week, first week of the month. Leading in, you'll see the schedule and the date. But being here sometimes allows you to talk directly with the devs, talk directly, ask questions on the
Yeah, he did say excited. If you're playing along and you have excited on your card, go ahead and mark it off. Wiki says now would be a good time to mention that Pantheon is a crowdfunded game. I agree. They have not said that yet. There's only like 20 minutes to go, and it looks like, based on the chapters here, it looks like this is all like community Q&A here pretty much for the rest. I'm surprised they haven't said it yet. They better fit it in there. Maybe at the end they'll get it in. Say Pantheon is a crowdfunded game, and then onward and upward, and then boom, we just end it on that. So we'll see.
Stream when we get a chance. So Adam, you're good to take some questions, right?
Yeah, let's do it. Whatever you guys want to throw at me, I will do my best.
And these aren't scripted, so guys, if we can't answer it, we can't. But David, I got one. I'm gonna start here if you're okay with that.
Okay.
So one of our community members here says, I remember somebody saying that in development, after the integration of the network stack,
there's
a
network.
lot of things that would move faster for development. Is that still expected to be true? And can you maybe just talk about why that might be the case, just a little bit?
Yeah. You know, that's going to be true for some things. It's not going to be true for everything. The network stack, for example, doesn't influence how quickly we can create art. And I know there was, I don't think it came up as a directed question, but just to say, yes, those enemy models are placeholder using low-res polys and low-res textures. But yeah, as far as programming support goes and engineering, and also, design tooling and some of the foundational elements of that. So for example, once networking, it comes online, now we're going to be able to do summoners, right? And pets are going to be extrapolated into other areas of the game, where now we can introduce, layers of content that we have been wanting to introduce, but just have not been able to do yet. And as soon as we've realized that, as soon as we've kind of crossed that bridge and been able to create that, we can begin propagating that everywhere else, right? Because we've built that foundation. The other side of this, of course, is once networking is done, Kyle will be freed up to do some other work as well. And so, we gain concurrency on other elements of our programming backlog and the things that are on that roadmap. And that will increase development, right?
Awesome.
Yeah, so the people asking about the summoner, maybe that answered it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk more on that at another time. This is a good question. Melee animations, actual contact or keeping the more floating.
Oh, you know what? Wizen says Minus was shown at 3 or 4 different levels of playwright and it was progressive. Does that count as a video montage? That's a good question. Mordred says he only needs disposition. Thorndeep only needs disposition, exploration, and crafting. Has anybody gotten bingo? Are we still all bingo lists up until this point? I guess so. I haven't seen anybody say bingo. I don't know. What do you guys think? Are we going to consider that a video montage? It kind of is. Again, I was picturing, sometimes they'll do these montages where it's just like 5-10 second clips, kind of like, the broad sweeping, camera shots through the world for, and then it'll cut to like another scene, flying through a different area, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I don't know if that's it. I mean, it was certainly in-game footage. I don't know if that's a video montage though. Whoops.
Hitbox style.
Yeah, actual contact. Let me preface that. When I say actual contact, I don't mean that you should be guaranteed to always be like right up against your enemy, right? So the way that we are designing this game, the way that tab targeting generally works, we will try to fit hitboxes as much as possible, but even then we have to allow for some leeway, both from a networking perspective, in case your position isn't registering when it needs to, but also if you're trying to run away from an enemy, if we have that buffer too small and you just hit sprint and start booking it, you will gain probably more advantages than we want you to have, and you won't necessarily take some hits that we would prefer you to take just to keep that difficulty level up. But the other side of that question that I've also seen some comments about is, hit animations, right? The reactivity to being hit. And that's absolutely something that we will be doing. But again, a lot of what you've seen were placeholder models. And so those animations have just not been brought in yet. That'll come with final art.
Great.
And if I can add to that real quick, because honestly, while it sounds great that you want your staff to make sure it hits an enemy so it looks like, from a gameplay perspective, it would be miserable. I mean, imagine a full group fighting enemies and having to be like right up in their face if you're using hand to hand. For a wizard or an enchanter who's standing back, it's not a problem. But when you start having to crunch up and stack on something to hit it, it really takes away a lot of the feel of the gameplay just for a very minimal thing that's probably not going to matter that much after you've played enough. So that hitbox should, as Adam says, should be a little bit bigger than, if that bird could only be physically hit, think of how small it is. And think about a bird that's like super high level when you're fighting it for a long time. It would not be enjoyable to have all your melee stacked up and you can't even see it.
Yeah, that is true.
I think spacing is required in this style of game, in tab target, as you said. And I don't think doing it the other way, although it sounds good, would actually be good.
And I don't know about you, I keep my camera out like pretty far when I'm playing an MMO, unless I can play in first person. But either way, right? If you're first person, you're not even necessarily seeing that connectivity. And if you're too far out, it's going to be, it's all a matter of perspective anyway. So keep your camera just rooted right behind your character and you won't even notice.
David, you said you had a question?
Yeah, before we get to the next question, someone was asking about the class matrix chart being posted somewhere. And I just want to let people know it's going to be on the website. It will be on, I believe, the class front page, and the whole visual, the whole graphic of the matrix will be there. So easy access, so you don't have to scroll through if you choose not to. But yeah. And then there was a question about, let me find it here for a second. The mob hit points, pretty normal for this level. At what point will players be expected to, quote, group up?
So this is an area that's still being fine-tuned, right? Again, we're still in pre-alpha. A lot of this is still a work in progress. We're closer to where we want to be, but we've got to get everyone in there and testing and hitting on these things to make sure that it's giving us the data that we want to see, right? That we're seeing the numbers and the time to kill that we want to see. So we're getting closer to that. But part of this is we've just made some bug fixes and adjustments that required us to shift the numbers again. So that's going to be an ongoing process, and honestly, I expect that process to continue at least into alpha. And even then, balance is just an ongoing process. All that being said, specifically with respect to grouping and solo ability, so Monk in general is a very soloable class, right? You have self heals, you have defensive abilities. That especially at the low level really Tony, minus you were saying earlier that you were playing the rogue, and that rogue
Yeah.
experience
Little
was
different.
very different from the monk. Yeah, just a little different. You don't have access to that basic dual wield until you get another weapon. You don't have those same defensive abilities, and so some of what you saw was just, this is how powerful monks are. But in general, the level that we expect to be kind of soloable is the 1 to 10 range. But if you haven't listened to it, the previous developer roundtable, I actually go into a little bit more detail about our expectations for solo ability. So even though level 10 is what we're targeting as like our big grouping level, the solo content will taper off and become more and more difficult as you go kind of creep up to and beyond that point.
I will say too, also, on top of that roundtable, Joppa also did an episode of Parting the Veil, which is their developer podcast where they dig deep into big topics like that. Joppa had a really good explanation about their philosophy towards soloing, because a lot of people do make the mistake of thinking that like the Pantheon is a grouping game only. And if you want a summary of that Parting the Veil episode, because it's a little bit longer. If you want a summary of that and kind of collection of everything that we know about soloing in Pantheon at this point, I did a video about that on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/BazGrimTV. So if you missed that one, go check it out, because it is a very important topic. Like, we're all going to be soloing at one point or another. It's not just about grouping, but there's a lot of nuance to it to understand. So yeah, definitely go check that out.
I think anything, the nature of these sort of games in general is, yeah, sure, you can solo, but it's going to go a lot faster when you have a group. In particular, the monk, there's an early quest that you could use some help on, in the first couple levels. So,
Yeah, I was going to add to that real quick, is that you saw me and Adam grouping towards the end there, and we died. So, the thing is you're going to have these paths to take. And David, you and I played for a long time today, and we died a lot. So, I've played through that monk that you saw there. I've played through like levels 1 to 6 like a lot of times, and played a little bit of the higher stuff to like 8, 10. But I'll tell you, like, if I wanted to play solo, I could, but it was going to take me longer. And even though I could solo, once I got in a group, I was trying to go after a little bit harder enemies, right? I tried to go to the skeletons a little bit earlier, because skeletons can drop weapons, right? Skeletons can drop cloth armor. And they would drop things that I could sell for a little bit more money. So while I could have just kept killing level 1, 2, 3, 4 things in a group, being able to take a group and challenge a little bit more difficult content where you can still get in trouble is very real. And I felt that tremendously through, so while you don't need to group, the urge to group and what you can achieve is like that carrot on a stick that will make you want to group, and you'll have advantage for doing so.
Yeah.
Yes. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Thanks for following. And Primus, I just noticed that you just followed as well. Thank you. Yeah, just if you didn't know, I do these every month. The Pantheon Dev Stream happens on the second Thursday, right? It's the second Thursday of every month is what they're doing now. And then I do these streams the following day, okay? I used to do them the day of and would watch it live as it was happening, but several months back just made the decision to react to it the day after. That way we can pause, we can talk through it as we go and break it down, rather than I used to kind of like hold off all my commentary till the end of the stream and then kind of like review it all at the end. But this, we're just kind of working through it slowly and chatting as we go. So this is a fun monthly ritual that we have in the community. So I don't mention it often, but if you're not following already, go ahead and follow so that you guys can come back each month and don't miss any of these because they are a good time. We're getting there. We've only got 11 minutes left.
So much detail about the developer round in the last developer roundtable. So if people want to know more about kind of the philosophy of what's driving players to group up more, Minus just did an excellent job of encapsulating that. But definitely give that a listen because we go into a lot more detail.
Reasonable Person says, ever think about doing this for the roundtables too? I haven't thought about it to be honest. I'm not sure exactly how that would work though, because the way that the roundtables work is that they're recorded. They're recorded in the VIP Discord server the last Friday of every month. Okay, and I actually normally don't tune into those live. I don't listen to them live because normally I've got other things going on Friday nights, like tonight, like I'm playing Magic later. But I will normally catch it. They put their recording up on YouTube the next day, which is when I'll watch it. But at that point, it's restricted. For I believe the champion and VIP supporters only. They get like a whole week where they can listen to the roundtable through a private link, and that before it is then released a week later to the public. And so I wouldn't be able to do my reaction on stream for the public until like a full week after it was actually recorded. And I don't know if I could do that, to be honest. I don't know if I could wait that long. Because in fact, to be honest, sometimes depending on what the topic of that roundtable is, I will actually take that week to prepare some sort of summary. Like if I'm gonna make a video summarizing it or using information from that roundtable about a particular topic, then I will take that time to kind of prepare that video so that I can have it released not too long after the source material is made public. So yeah, I don't know. And with the roundtables, like there's no video, it's all just audio. So, it's not a bad idea at all, but I don't know. I've never really thought about it. I'm not really sure how that would work. I would like to come up with ways though to stream, do things like this more frequently, because I enjoy it so much. And I learn a lot, to be honest. I learn a lot from you guys. And it's just a good time. I think it's important to get together on a regular basis. So, yeah, I'm definitely always keeping an eye out for things like this that work as kind of like a consistent thing that we can get together and do together. Because again, like this isn't the community watch party is all, it's always been intended to not be just me, getting up here and just like, lecturing about a particular topic or something like that. That's my, the YouTube channel is more about, that's the produced kind of like usually more educational, type videos about a particular topic where I'm just sharing what I know. Whereas on Twitch, this is more like fun, kind of casual. We're just kind of like hanging out together, reacting, chatting, it's all about us together as the community. So, yeah, if you guys can think of any other ideas of things that you would like to do kind of like this on a regular basis, feel free to let me know because I'm all ears.
David, you got another question?
So here's one. Joppa told us resource regen stops in combat, but Tehom was sitting to med while enemy was mezzed. Is combat meditating back?
It is. One thing I will say is that the time that it takes to enter the resting state where you begin regenerating, there's actually a little bit of a kind of time lapse before you get to that state if you're trying to rest in combat. So that does discourage you from just sitting as soon as you need to, and again, plays into resource management. But yes, it is back.
I also want to let you know, Adam, that they love your shirt. This is an interesting question, and I don't know if we can really get on it yet, but will a monk who has chosen the keeper path still be able to solo similar content as one who has not?
Choosing to be a keeper.
We gotta
another
get
thing that
perception.
we kind of talked about in the last DRT, but choosing to be a keeper has no bearing on your combat ability. The only thing that, and again, this is something that we are not fully committed to yet. It's our current design philosophy.
Dispositions.
There was some pretty good reception to it, so we're definitely interested in moving forward with this in testing. But the notion is that any skills that are kind of part of the keeper kit, the idea of being able to identify enemy traits or reveal, certain passages.
Say it, goddammit.
Skills can be put onto the bar, but you don't have to bring them, right? If you don't want to play a keeper or you don't want to be a keeper role, in a group at that moment, right? You just don't bring those skills, and you're still as effective because you replace those skills with your, core class skills or other techniques.
Great.
So,
Bro, Tom, you're killing me, man. How do you talk about being a keeper without saying the word perception? And you said traits, but not dispositions. Oh, such a missed opportunity, man. That could have been two. Not that I think we're gonna get a lore reading at this point. So it probably doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter because there's no prizes, but like, god dang it though. You get my hopes up.
two questions that tie into the sitting that you were talking about with in combat.
Reasonable says, I don't think you're going to get bingo. Spoiler alert. Oh, you're killing me. I refuse to believe it.
But in general,
we still got 10 minutes.
I'm going to kind of put into one. So first, how does sitting affect stamina regeneration?
Authoritative says it's almost like they know what's on the cards and just messing with the community. Wiki says I think he was doing it on purpose too. He might be. Did it seem like he was kind of dancing around his words? That's the problem. We're gonna have to rethink this. There's a problem with the devs knowing what's on the cards, and they can just screw us over by never saying any of the words that are on the cards. I don't actually think they would do that, but they could. Like the Super Bowl probably doesn't know what's on my Super Bowl bingo card. So it's a little bit more fair this way. We got to come up with a way that we can distribute these bingo cards amongst the community without the devs ever finding out. I'm going to have to think about that. Good luck with that.
Top of that, you kind of talked about this before, but if you could explain a little bit about how sitting is incremental. So if you stay sitting for longer, you start to get a gain in that. There's some questions on what that looks like.
What if they have their cards up on the screen while they're streaming, and so that they have it right up in front of them. They're so they know exactly what to avoid. Because that seems a little sus, a little too convenient that he didn't say perception or disposition. It was a perfect setup too. I will be changing these, by the way. We got to keep it fresh each month. So I'll update. You guys gave me some good ideas for some things that totally need to be added. And like Ronix said, immersive. I don't know how I didn't think of that one. That should be on there. So I'll update it. And again, I know it's a little rough the way it works now. That the URL, if you go to this page and you just copy and paste the URL, because I'm using a tool that I don't own to create these bingo cards, the way that they have it set up, so if I were to update this bingo card, it will change the URL. So if you just copy and paste this URL, you're not going to get the updated versions of bingo. So my kind of little workaround for that is using a bit.ly URL as kind of the forward-facing URL for Pantheon Bingo. So if every month you just type bit.ly/Pantheon Bingo, and that, save that, and that will that will redirect you to whatever the most updated version of the bingo card is. Does that make sense? Again, I know it's a little janky because it's a little early, but that's just how we have it set up now. But I will definitely, before next month, be adding some more words to the card so that we can get more diversity and hopefully get some more bingos.
Yeah. So with respect to, I think it was endurance, right? That they were asking if endurance would regenerate. Sitting currently doesn't have a bearing on endurance, and that's really because endurance already regenerates pretty quickly. In fact, it regenerates much more quickly than you would be waiting. By the time that you got like your first couple of ticks of sitting regeneration, your endurance would already be back up to full, at least assuming default regeneration rates. With respect to the actual process of kind of building up your ticks, so the idea is you sit down, and the first time that your health regen ticks, it's ticking for 1 point, right? Assuming that you don't have anything else that's modifying it. And it's going to tick at 1 point for, I don't recall the precise number of seconds. I want to say we have it currently set to 10. But effectively at 10 seconds, every tick is now up by +1s. Now you're ticking at 2 each tick. 10 seconds after that, it's another +1. Now you're ticking at 3 each tick. And so it just continues to build up and up and up. And yes, I appear to be Tokyo drifting. It's, we were just, I was told not to use my hands, and I've just been,
I'm surprised we haven't just seen your shoulder at this point.
Yeah, what is that?
I'm going to give
funny.
a bean without really giving much of a bean because I don't want to get in trouble, but it sort of is. There's a question here that says the mountains or rocks seem sort of low poly. Seems like they don't fit the rest. I'm just going to say that we're not ready to show it yet, David, but me and you have talked that in the future here, there has been some, let me put it this way, jaw-dropping, and I know that we don't want to overhype. But
jaw-dropping?
As long as you two both say jaw-dropping is okay to say, that there has been some jaw-dropping work done on terrain that heavily affects mountaining and rocks. And that was just recently showed off around the development team. So stay tuned. Right?
I mean, I knew that the rocks were not finalized. But jaw dropping, that's quite high praise for rocks. Like, has anybody ever looked at a rock and their jaw dropped? We'll see.
Is that good? Is that a good bean job?
Listen, you that's on you, man.
Yeah.
I take no responsibility of things that Yes, we're obviously we've talked a little bit last stream about some of the new hires, and I think it's important to note that not only the new hires, but obviously the people who have been here for a while. Everybody's really stepped it up a notch, particularly in the last 3 months, and since the all the network stuff is being done, and you can. I am
a new environment artist. Yeah.
Excitement internally that obviously we're excited to show as much as we can externally. Minus wants to jump the gun and start talking about things.
No details there.
I used to be my role. I used to be the guy who would spoil things and get in trouble, and then Brendyn would yell at me. So I'm glad you're here now. Adam, you have the authority to drop whatever you'd like here. So
I think I've dropped a pretty good number already. Okay. I don't know that I've gotten any more, but yeah, I know exactly what Minus is talking about. I've actually been in that scene and looked at the mountains that people saw in our HDRP reveal and literally just spun around and saw what was going on in the other direction. And I would say it was, well, that's all I'll say about it. It was jaw-dropping and exciting. And
wow, that's 2 jaw droppings.
Just all the best things. I know we're wrapping up here. Can I pick one question out of chat?
Yeah, please.
Yeah.
You can pick. We have enough for 2 questions.
Awesome. Well,
look at Ronik is totally the no beans dean now. He's totally playing that role. Like, we're running low on time here. We just gotta. He better say Pantheon is a crowdfunded game. If he doesn't, he's fired. And onward and upward while you're at it, please. Thank you. I know this has already happened in the past, but I'm still hoping.
about the change between indirect to direct healing for druids, and I actually want to address this because I've seen this kind of come up in a few different places. So in the developer roundtable, which I feel like I'm just plugging this over and over, but really,
please,
and I'm
tell
saying
me
that because I was the one who did it, right?
But you also have to tell them where they could see it now and listen to it after. Like that's the whole plugging thing.
YouTube. That's about as much as I know.
YouTube.
We'll put a link to it in this. I'm assuming that I'm giving Tony direction here. Let's put a link to that at the end. Yeah. And that way I don't have to tell anyone where to find it. But yeah, so with respect to indirect versus direct healing.
Doesn't T-Home know how to YouTube? You say link is in the description. That's how we do it.
So I made a comment in that roundtable that with the changes, not changes to healers, but rather the reinforcing and crystallizing of their roles, that druids would be kind of our direct potency healers. But we previously talked about druids as indirect healers in the sense that a lot of their healing is coming through reactivity or through Herode. And to be very clear, when I say direct, it's not that we're removing that indirect component, that indirectness of reactivity or healing through another entity. It's strictly in the terms of like how direct damage is, I'm going to press a button and it's immediately going to do this value. If I have an indirect heal through reactivity, it's indirect because it's reactive, but at the same time, when it triggers, it's coming in as a lump sum value, the entire amount of healing all at once.
Awesome. There you go. Minus, do you have any more? Or...
Yeah, I'll do one more.
Okay.
I'm shocked that we didn't hear more about this, so I'm gonna throw it to you.
I'm glad he clarified that, because with that combined with what they were talking about, clerics being mitigative healers, like it almost did seem like those styles, again, it's not really a role, but it's more of like it's a style of that healing archetype had been like flipped, where it's like, okay, now druids are like the direct, high value, just single target throughput heals now, and then the clerics are more of that like indirect / shielding type. But it doesn't sound like that's necessarily been like a complete flip like that. So interesting.
Floating text. This is the first time anyone's seen it.
There it is.
I think this is the first time anyone's seen the floating text.
There it is.
So it looks like no negative on that, which is awesome. But somebody asked what we're seeing, because I think that it might be just seeing it quickly. If you go watch it, I think you're going to be able to understand it a little better. But I know we have numbers on the left that are going up, numbers on the right that are going down. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now with that anyway?
I mean, so this is really a first pass. I know some people have, it's one of those polarizing things. People love it, people hate it. Yes, there will be toggles for these things. We want to give players as much control over their experience as possible. But with respect to what you're seeing right now, I mean, yeah, so you're seeing, now I'm going to have to remember which ones are floating up and floating down. I want to say the floating up is your target, the floating down is yourself, and there's a little bit of offset occurring there. And you are seeing, your hit events, your dodges, your blocks, your evades, as well as criticals, which are, popping up a little bit stronger. And also as part of that, so right now we don't have them, but in the future, we're also going to be capturing things like when you have a buff or a buff added to you, or debuff, or when a buff or a debuff wears off. So really the idea there is, if you like floating combat text, we want to keep you engaged in the scene and able to see what's going on without having to scroll through a chat log.
And I'm going to add on to that because it was also kind of related how in the casting bar of enemies, you could see if it was non-interruptible. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I actually wanted to speak to that before you even brought it up, so I'm glad you did. That is also, so part of that is just an example of us proving out functionality, right? So again, remember that what you're seeing is work in progress. And when we say work in progress, we mean work in progress. I mean, you are seeing this raw. And so this example, right, where you can see, this ability is interruptible, this ability is silenceable. Part of that is just the functionality, right? The functionality to differentiate between those different types of abilities on a UI element, specifically what form it takes and whether it's hidden behind something like perception. Wait and see.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna go back.
So moving on, let's talk a little bit about Monk's Guild.
Because I find this interesting. I'll go back to actually show, like, let's review what they were actually talking about.
as soon as I have it, or do I save it for something bigger or for a string of attacks?
Because to be honest, it took me a little while to figure out what was going on, like why some numbers are going up, why some numbers are going down. I was like, why are all these numbers just going off in like weird directions? But after looking at it a little bit longer, it does make sense that, like, especially from this angle, the damage that you're doing to your target is going up kind of like into their health bar, and then the damage that they're doing is coming down and, subtracting from your health bar. Again, really hope that there is as much customizability about this as possible, because even in my mind, I think it actually would be useful to have more space in between those columns, and maybe even change the color of, the color of the text of the damage that you're doing is a very obviously different color from the text of the damage that your opponent is doing. Have them separated so that it's easier to tell them apart. I do, however, like that the ability, like if in this case the strike ability did 18 damage, like I like that it is labeled so exactly how much damage that ability did, where that damage is coming from. It looks a little bit busy, especially if you're using a lot of abilities, or some of these abilities have kind of like long names. It can take up quite a bit of space on the screen, especially when you're getting into, like, you start adding more NPCs at higher levels, and you're doing more damage and using more abilities. It might start to get a little bit cluttered, but for a first pass, not bad. Wiki says you can probably toggle having just the numbers, not the names. I would hope so. I agree. I think that would be a good adjustment, because some people might really not care, where the damage is coming from, as long as they're doing damage. I could imagine, though, especially for people who really care about, like, min-maxing their damage, and especially in things like this where maybe you really want to sit down and do the math. Maybe if they have like a training dummy or something, and you're trying to figure out what the best combos and such are, you can flip that on so that you can get a better analysis of where your damage is coming from. And then I would think, though, in a real scenario, like a real combat scenario, especially if you're grouping, like, I don't know, we'll have to see. Is there going to be too much going on where you're not really going to be paying attention to what ability is doing what damage? I don't know. But again, I mean, like I said, I think their philosophy is in the right place, where, if it's UI related and only the player is seeing it, it doesn't affect anybody else, like, you should have as many options as realistically possible to really customize it to make it look how you want it to look. No DPS and aggro meters. All right, where was I? I might have.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing right now with that anyway?
Okay, I gotta skip ahead a little bit here.
Stronger when a buffer.
We're almost there, folks. Almost there.
Also, kind of related, how in the casting bar of enemies you can see if it was non-interrupted.
Oh, I forgot about that. I actually didn't notice that before. I think I noticed the bear. The bear was using abilities.
Really knowing your enemies and your skills and even your team.
I don't remember seeing like there's an indication of whether or not it's interruptible. Because if so, that's a good idea. That's a good idea.
And what your teammates bring to the table. I mean, those are the differentiators, not just between failure and success, but even just efficiency and risk mitigation. So this even calls back to the comment about downtime, right?
Oh, I see.
Because now you have
okay. So Oh, it really that really depends on the angle that you're viewing the combat. So damage going out just floats up above you. Like, it's more obvious from this angle that it's centered like over your character. The damage that you're doing goes straight up from your character, and the damage that you're doing comes straight down on top of your target.
Risk mitigation. So this even calls back to the comment about downtime, right?
Okay, that's pretty cool. But again, if you're looking like straight behind your character, looking at your target, I mean, obviously they can't overlap. I would like there to be, you know, a pretty good distance in between, so it's pretty obvious.
Now you have this.
We'll have to see again, because you know, when you start adding in multiple NPCs that are damaging you from like behind, and you're doing AOEs that are hitting multiple targets or something, that can get kind of complicated.
To use your resources in a way longer, because you're not using the example of resonating X fight manipulation. Difference between being ready to handle, you know, a sudden add or a bad pull and a full wipe. And I mean, that is exactly what we want to see. That is exactly what we're driving towards. And I'm just grinning ear to ear that you felt that.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I love hearing about all the.
Okay, so I mean, that's cast bar. I'm assuming, since it doesn't say that otherwise, that is an interruptible ability. Wiki says the bunny kick had a cast bar
Because of the work on and stuff. Monk.
Those are death.
do these guys?
Those a little bit more susceptible to downtime.
Oh, wait.
You know, they're driven more universally by mana as a reason.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I wanted to find something that like differentiates whether it's silenceable or not. And this, okay, so it's a little too long for this text box, but it's off in the distance there. I don't know if you can see, it says curse bolt, then in parentheses, silencer, which I'm assuming is short for silenceable. Oh, so, okay. So it only tells you if it is silenceable, which is that the same as being interruptible? I think so. So I'm assuming then if it doesn't specify otherwise, then it's not interruptible. Or maybe silenceable is like a magical spell, and interruptible is like maybe a martial ability, but like, because the bear's maul ability didn't say anything, so it's like, I would understand if you're using like a spell, like a silence spell that removes somebody's ability to cast spells, you know, strips them of their magic temporarily or something so they can't cast spells. You know, that wouldn't work on a bear using a maul ability with their paw, you know. Okay, so that makes sense. But again, I think it would be a little bit more clarity on that would be helpful. I don't know if maybe you like assign icons to it. I don't know. You don't want to get too many icons. I know, speaking from designing board games, icons can be great. Icons can be amazing for representing information that needs to be conveyed frequently. So something like this, like, you know, if there's a lot of abilities that are silenceable or interruptible, rather than spelling out silenceable and interruptible every time, you might want to come up with a icon to represent that, and then you just slap the icon on there, rather than, you know, adding a lot more text. As long as it is clear that, you know, and players know what that means, because you can totally take it too far where If you have too many icons, like I don't know if you've ever played the board game Seven Wonders, you'll know what I mean, where there's just so many different icons and they all mean different things, and every card has like 5 different icons on it, and you need to know what they all mean in order to even start playing the game. That can be a lot, that can be overwhelming. It's too much to keep track of if you got all these different icons that have all these different meanings. So in something like this, if a new player starting off, they might see an icon next to an ability and not know what it means. That can increase the learning curve a little bit. But as far as things being silenceable and interruptible, like, is that something they really need to know clearly at level 1? I don't know. Wiki says the recap you see in chat, that will not be visible to us, I suppose. Oh yeah, so you're talking because in that fight T-Home was totally slacking. Yeah, so this down here, that's a good point. So this down here where it says recap of fight with shambling skeleton, 15.75 seconds, minus his damage and healing, T-Home's damage and healing. Yeah, that for all you min-maxers out there, that will not be visible to regular players. This is a GM thing that they use for the purposes of balancing. But yeah, we will not have it spelled out like that for us. So thank you for pointing that out. Thorndeep says not a fan of all the info. I mean, there's something to be said about that too, where to some degree, just let players figure it out. That's the part of the mystery, the fun, the thing that makes like mysteries so fun. Like if you've ever played any sort of mystery game, again, it's tough to find that right line where you want to provide enough information to get them going so that they can feel like they're getting correct feedback on what they're doing, and they can make good decisions accordingly. So you want to give just enough information, but not so much that it is overwhelming and just turns into just going through the motions. Like it is possible to know too much too, and it kind of spoils the process of learning and that player knowledge. Where the veteran players can shine because maybe they just have memorized what abilities are interruptible and which ones aren't. It doesn't even take that long. Like I think there is a fairly good argument to be made there, because it's not like there's a huge risk involved in figuring out whether or not a ability is interruptible or not. Like you just target it, and once they're using an ability, you try to hit your interrupt, and if it works, then great, and if not, then you're like, okay, well, that's not interruptible. Like you just got to try once. Like it doesn't take that long to figure out, but at that point you're like, oh, I learned something, and then even it seems like such a minor thing, but still it's like you discovered something, and you'll probably remember it at that point, and that gives you things you can maybe teach other people that you come across. So again, it's a very minor thing in the grand scheme of it all, but I think there's definitely a debate to be had there for sure.
We like floating combat text. We want to keep you engaged in the scene and able to see what's going on without having to scroll through a chat log.
And I'm going to add on to that, because it was also kind of related how in the casting bar of enemies you could see if it was non-interruptible. Just want to clarify that.
Yeah, I actually wanted to speak to that before you even brought it up, so I'm glad you did. Yeah, that is also, so part of that is just an example of us proving out functionality, right? So again, remember that what you're seeing is work in progress. And when we say work in progress, we mean work in progress. I mean, you are seeing this raw. And so this example, right, where you can see, you know, this ability is interruptible, this ability is silenceable. Part of that is just the functionality, right? The functionality to differentiate between those different types of abilities on a UI element, specifically what form it takes and whether it's hidden behind something like perception. Wait and see.
Wait. He just said perception. Boom. All right, it's not over yet, people.
Perception.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
Well, we went a little long tonight, you know, compared to where we've been. It's kind of.
Did I miss anything? Did I miss
So
anything
appreciate everybody
else?
hanging out with us. Again, head on over to the website, get involved, visit our socials, pass the information. If you like what you saw, pass it to your friends. You know, we are obviously a crowdfunded game, and
there it is.
On support from you guys. So thank you much. And Adam, thank you. You know, it's awesome having you on always, but in particular when we have something amazing to show like tonight.
Come on, last minute lore reading.
I was just so happy to share. Always love being able to share what's been going on and join both of you in doing so. So yeah, I'm excited to see how everyone's going to
40 seconds left.
Like a hawk. So yeah, thank you guys, and thank you to the community. So happy that you all joined us tonight.
Yeah, and we're gonna have some
and onward and upward.
So stay tuned for that. Exciting stuff.
Oh, stay tuned. That's a good one.
Minus.
Exciting.
Another good stream. Thank you, buddy.
Oh, come on, Minus. That was your chance to say. And
month.
onward and upward. Dang it. All right. Well, we got a lot. Oh, we're so close. Did anybody get bingo? Somebody had to have gotten bingo. I was so close to 1, 2, 3. I was one away. I was one away from 3 bingos. Anybody? I'm gonna have to make some changes so we can get more bingos next month. They were totally messing with the community. I agree. You know what? No, I'm not going to change bingo. Let's blame the devs. What we need to change is we need to be more subversive. That's the word. We need to be more sneaky. How can we outsmart them? Mordred said you needed 1 in 3 as well. Thorn Deep, so close yet so far. I know. All right, it was a valiant effort. Not bad for the first time playing Pantheon Bingo, guys. This was a blast, regardless. Even though we didn't get to say bingo, this was still a lot of fun. I'm glad we did it. Thank you to everybody for joining. This was even more of a blast than usual. So, again, like I said, we will meet back here, same place, same time next month, or. What was that? I always used to say, same Baz time, same Baz channel. There we go. That's got a nice ring to it. Thank you, everybody. Again, I will, in the meantime, be seeing you around the community. This was a really good stream. This was solid. You know, I normally, I will rewatch it again. Normally, there'll probably be some things in here that I would kind of single out and then take over to YouTube to kind of do like more of a summary about something in particular. But I mentioned on social media a little bit ago that for right now, for the next, I don't know, some number of months, like I've got some other kind of like more behind the scenes things that I need to really nail down. Like I'm working on overhauling my Patreon page, which I haven't done in years since I really started the channel, making some updates to that, which will then kick off some other kind of just little projects that I'm working on. Some things that you'll see sooner, some things are in preparation for bigger projects that are happening later. So that's kind of where I'm at now, because again, we're still waiting for news on the network library and pre-alpha and progress toward alpha and stuff. And so it seems like we're, in the meantime, as much fun as this is, we're still kind of like waiting for some bigger milestones like that. So I'm taking this time to kind of change gears a little bit and work on some behind the scenes stuff, which means, I've only got so many hours in the day. So I think the way that I'm going to do YouTube for the immediate future is focus, again, those like highly produced videos that I put on YouTube are going to be more for updates related to those bigger milestones, those development milestones. I'll put the full recording of this up on YouTube for sure. But I know not everybody has the time. We've been live for like 2.5 hours now. I know not everybody has that amount of time. So my shorter things, like the Baz Flash and shorter videos like that, will be about those bigger milestones as opposed to things like design, which this stream covered for the most part, which, design is it's important, but that's just, again, I had to kind of make a decision with the limited amount of time that I have. So, I'm sure later down the line, I'll revisit the things, I'll do later down the line a video about combat, and it will be more kind of like a collection of things that they have said in the past, including some things in the stream. So that's where I'm at right now, but I'm not going underground by any means. So I'll still see you around the community. Join the Basgrim TV Discord server while you're at it to stay in touch. That's a great place to keep in touch. We just added some new emojis to that server, which are pretty funny. We got a dead Ronick emoji in there. We've got a bean alert emoji in there. We've got some fun ones. So anyway, until I see you again, please stay safe. Thank you once again. And we'll see you next time. Okay. So stay curious and adventure on.